this is Steve Zeltzer with Workweek, and the issue of war and peace is a life and death issue for the working class in the United States and the world. And of course, the United States has had many wars abroad, in fact, continuing wars since the Second World War, one war after another. And there is now a new war in the Ukraine that is going on, and billions of dollars are being allocated for this war to send more equipment, military weapons into Ukraine. And the trade union movement in the United States has supported the U.S. government in more money for military intervention. And joining us today is Cliff Smith. He's the business manager of the Roofers Local 36 in Los Angeles, and has been a longtime activist against war and in the community. Welcome to Workweek, Cliff.
Thank you, brother.
So, Cliff, why don't we talk about the question of war and the history of unions in relationship to wars in the United States?
The only way that we can really approach this question is to understand the primary contradiction between the working class and capital, or more contemporary, the people versus monopoly capitalism and imperialism. And as you mentioned, since World War II, every war that the United States has participated in, whether officially or unofficially, has been a war of imperialism, a war in the interests of monopoly capitalism, and the working class has no interest in any of these adventures. And as labor leaders, our job is to oppose these conflicts, to oppose any capitalist adventures, to educate our members, of our unions and the working class at large, that we have nothing to benefit from any of this, and we need to oppose it.
And many of these wars that the United States has been involved in, the Korean War, Vietnam War, we were bringing democracy supposedly to other countries. Is that the real reason that the United States has been going to other countries, invading other countries, Iraq, one country after another, it seems like?
Well, I think that the people of Korea and the people of Vietnam will be surprised to learn that the United States has an interest in democracy at all. I remember learning that Ho Chi Minh studied internationally and was very impressed with the early American ideals of democracy, and that he appealed to those principles. But he quickly came to understand that it was all a pretense and a facade, that there is no democracy in America. And any surface level study of American history will show you that there's no democracy here, let alone as a matter of foreign policy.
And what has been the role of the United States in Ukraine that you know about? Because it seems like the United States has been involved in the internal affairs of Ukraine for some time now.
As I understand, the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991. I remember watching on CNN the tanks in Red Square. The promise was made that NATO would not expand 1 inch eastward for the reunification of Germany, and none of that was followed through on. There's been 5 expansions of NATO driven by the United States, and this kind of led to a showdown in 2014, where the democratically elected government of Ukraine was overthrown by an insurrection, a coup that was backed by the United States, that was ran through with acknowledged fascist Nazi elements. And the United States has poured billions of dollars in weapons, in military support into the anti-democratic coup government in Ukraine to bolster it. And that kind of, leads us to the conflict that is happening today.
And these oligarchs that we supported in Ukraine in 2014, were they different from the other oligarchs that were there already?
Well, as I understand, there's a number of billionaires in Russia, and there's a greater number of billionaires in the United States. And, ultimately they have the same interests, although they squabble amongst themselves for position, for land, for markets. These monopoly capitalists, their interests have nothing to do with the interests of the members of my union or the working class in general, whether in Russia, in the Ukraine, in the United States, or anywhere.
And the AFL-CIO Solidarity Center you mentioned about U.S. intervention in Ukraine was involved in supporting some union officials, supporting young unions in Ukraine who were actually involved in privatizing the mines and the other wealth of Ukraine. Are you aware of that? And also, what do you think about the AFL-CIO being involved in intervening in unions in the Ukraine?
Well, what I know, and I don't have a lot of information, and I would welcome any education on it. But what I know is that the AFL-CIO put forward a statement in line with the ITUC, the International Trade Union Confederation, to which it's affiliated, that basically holds all responsibility onto Russia and onto Putin. And as true as that may go, it does not make any mention of the aggressions of NATO, of the United States, of the European Union. And to take this type of one-sided explanation for this conflict, to inform the 13 million members of the AFL-CIO, is basically to deceive them in the interests of the ruling class of the United States, of Wall Street, of the oil conglomerates. It's a chauvinistic position, and that's been the history of the AFL-CIO since, I suppose, soon after World War II.
And I know on CNN yesterday there was a commentary by I guess a military expert saying that the military industrial complex was going to do a great thing in arming the Ukrainians. They're doing great work, the military industrial complex. I mean, was pretty interesting that they would be that forward about the military industrial complex. At the same time, the Congress seems to be very united, the Democrats and Republicans, in appropriating billions more dollars into Ukraine, yet we don't have national health care. They just said we don't have money for more protection from COVID. The COVID pandemic is continuing. It seems like the priority of the Democrats and Republicans as far as war is more of a priority than taking care of the people in this country, their needs, housing, healthcare, and other issues.
And on that point, the Democrats have control of Congress, and they have put forward a progressive agenda in the Build Back Better legislation. But the Democratic Party cannot get it passed internally because they say that we can't afford it. But they passed a $785 billion military budget last December. And again, now, as you say, pouring billions more into this conflict. That military defense corporations stocks are exploding. Oil companies, seem to be doing pretty well for themselves. Although it's harder for us to fill our gas tanks, it's harder for our roofing contractors to provide materials that are petroleum based. But the ruling class and monopoly capitalists profit from these conflicts, from these adventures, these wars. And so, it's not a surprise that the Democrats and certainly the Republicans are 100% in favor of it. This gung-ho flag waving, campaign but none of this benefits working people in the United States, in Russia, and certainly not in the Ukraine.
And recently, the Biden administration decided they're going to reach out to Venezuela to see if they can get more oil. What do you think about the use of sanctions? It seems like major oil producing countries, not only Venezuela, but Iran and other countries have sanctions on them, which hurt the people of those countries and actually increase the price of oil for working people in the United States.
You know, I read that, and I was looking for the report of what President Guaido was going to respond. You know, the United States and various European countries have designated Juan Guaido as the self-selected president of Venezuela, and so you know I haven't heard from him. But the popularly elected president of Maduro, as I understand, he has suggested that they're ready to provide oil exports. The only obstacle to that at all has been, as you say, these sanctions that have been imposed on anti-imperialist countries like Venezuela, Cuba, for no purpose at all, except for a political charade. And all that does is injure the poor and the working people in these nations, and even in the United States, as you're implying, it inflates our costs. It's not the owners of these corporations that shoulder the burden. It's our wallets, it's our pockets that pay for the inflated costs of these sanctions.
And it seems historically, when imperial empires are in decline, as apparently the United States is, that they become more and more adventurous as they go into decline, leading to possibly world war. The surrounding of China by U.S. military, and we want to arm Japan with nuclear weapons to get rid of Article 9 in their constitution, to allow them to go on the offensive. It seems like the United States is really pushing for the surrounding of China, of Russia, and push them into a confrontation that could lead to world war. Is that what you see going on?
Well, history shows us that capitalism only will lead to war. Whether it comes directly out of this current conflict, or it comes the day after tomorrow in a different place. I remember Amiri Baraka saying that you don't want to get into a war with China because you can't make enough bullets. I think the Chinese people are pretty well equipped to handle. They've been for thousands of years dealing with threats. I don't think that the United States is in a position that it wants to be, or that it presents itself to be able to give directions to the rest of the world. And I think the important point, as you say, is that the United States is in decline. It's being reported in regular news that Saudi Arabia is entertaining the idea of no longer using the US dollar and instead using the Chinese currency to purchase oil. And, the moment that happens, the dollar is going to collapse. The strength of the dollar as an international currency is dependent on its basis as the petrol currency. And as soon as any of these oil producing countries abandons the dollar, the United States is going to have to deal with its foreign debt, its constant deficits, its failure to produce anything, and the dollar will collapse internationally, and then we're going to see crisis like we haven't seen in my lifetime anyway.
And we're speaking with Cliff Smith. He's the business manager of the Roofers Local 36 in Los Angeles. And Cliff, of course, the collapse of the dollar, a world depression that we're talking about, if that happened. Yet it seems that the Democrats who run California, who run Congress, who run the government, have not said at all that the billionaires who've made massive wealth during this pandemic should pay any cost I mean, it seems to be over 180 billionaires in California. There's massive wealth, yet they're laying off teachers in Oakland, San Francisco. They're attacking school districts, public education. It seems like the Democrats really taking their orders from these billionaires who run California, run this country, run the world.
Nancy Pelosi has been transparent in saying that the Democratic Party is a capitalist party. And we appreciate her her honesty and forthrightness. The working class needs a party that represents our interests, and the Democratic Party is not that. This is a massive project that we must undertake to build a workers' party on the basis of people's democracy against monopoly capitalism. But nobody is going to solve our problems for us. And so, the journey of 1,000 miles starts with the single step, and so we need to take up this project.
And how do you see that taking place? Because as you know, and most workers know, the unions seem to be tied totally to the Democratic Party. I mean, they're supporting Gavin Newsom, who has been attacking public workers. He's basically refused to support single payer in California, even though the nurses and many other working people are in favor of single payer. He appoints people to the boards of UC who are billionaires, who are millionaires, where working people can't afford to go to college because of the high cost. It seems like this struggle in the labor movement is intensifying. And yet the unions don't want to really challenge it, because in Los Angeles, the public workers contract is up. They're fighting outsourcing and privatization of public services. They're going on massively, and charter schools, which are being used to attack public education.
Well, there's no silver bullet. We have to start where we're at, and that means locally and from the ground up. There's no panacea. We can't hope that some statewide champion of workers' interests is going to emerge and just out of whole cloth provide for an organization that's ready to challenge the Gavin Newsoms, or the Pelosi's, or these people, or let alone at a national level. We have to start locally. We have to start at the school board level, at the city council level, and we have to challenge the Democrats strategically, where it's not going to empower the Republicans, our greater enemy, but in these urban centers, where I live in Los Angeles. I ran for city council in the last election. We support Local 36 supports independent local candidates for elected positions. There's examples around the country, Kashama Sawant in Seattle, the independent government in Jackson, Mississippi, the insurgency of Ras Baraka in Newark, New Jersey. There's examples around the country that we can look at where locally you can organize independently and grassroots in the interests of the community against the established Democratic Party rule and win. And from those positions to put forward a program that impacts on national consciousness and to raise up the level of organization to a higher level. If we could win in Richmond, California, if we can win in, a seat, hopefully in Los Angeles, we can begin to connect the dots toward building a nationwide party of working people.
And the Vermont AFL-CIO has also called for independent worker action. They're supporting independent people. And also they called for actually a general strike against a fascist coup. And that's the other issue of the rise of fascism. Are you concerned about the fact that a lot of right-wingers and fascists are going to Ukraine to train with the United States or be trained by the United States in this war, and may end up going back to their countries, including the United States, and carrying out, physical military attacks?
And that's why this is not abstract. This discussion, this question, because as was mentioned earlier, the situation in 2014, the way that insurrection was implemented. If you go back and look at some of those reports and those videos and those stories in the news, you could see a direct line from that toward the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol last year to try to overthrow the democratically elected president in the United States. And so I think that it's very clear that the people that are designing these insurrections are working in league with each other. The fact that, as you say, that mercenaries are going to the Ukraine to involve themselves in this. Once this conflict is over, whichever way it gets resolved, those soldiers, those mercenaries, those vigilantes are going to return to their countries of origin, many of them from the United States, many of them former U.S. military, and they're going to go back to the Oath Keepers and the Three Percenters and the Proud Boys and these organizations that have become established parts of the current right wing in the United States and present a clear and present danger to democracy as we know it.
So it seems like this is a critical question. It's not an abstract question for American working people. This war in Ukraine could spill over and you could have a blowback even in the United States. So, I mean, the danger for people here could be a threat as well.
Well, it's a danger, in two ways. Number one, that it could spill over into Europe directly and just continue escalating into international war. But even if it doesn't, that, as you say, the blowback that the adventurists that have went and participated in that are going to return to the United States or other countries in Europe, for instance, and continue their fascist militias. We see across Europe and across the United States the rising threat of fascism as an armed force, and it's nothing that we can take lightly.
What do you think needs to be done as far as organizing in the United States? You ran as an independent working class candidate in Los Angeles. How do you see organizing nationally or even in California to link up workers who do want a political alternative, who want a working class party in this country, so that they have a choice between against the Democrats and Republicans, who seem to have a united policy, actually?
Well, we have to put forward a clear and uncompromising program to organize workers without the influence of capitalist political influence. The Democratic Party certainly is a capitalist organization, and we need to have an organization and ultimately a party that represents workers' interests. We need to continue to challenge the leadership of our labor unions from the local level all the way to the top, that they're not putting forward an anti-capitalist position, that they're in bed and they're compromised with the ruling class, with monopoly capitalism, and this is a betrayal of workers.
And there's going to be an AFL-CIO national convention in Philadelphia, June the 9th. You think that should be an issue presented to the AFL-CIO convention delegates and to labor, that there needs to be a political alternative for working people in this country?
I would hope that it would be. I don't know anybody that is a delegate to that convention to try to put something in their ear, but it has to be part of the discussion, and if it doesn't come up on the floor at the AFL-CIO convention, then we have to push it. We have to push it in the streets.
Okay, well, I want to thank you very much for joining us. We've been talking with Cliff Smith. He's the business manager of the Roofers Local 36 in Los Angeles and has been fighting for a workers' party, independent labor party in the Los Angeles area. So thanks for joining us on Work Week, Cliff.
Okay, my brother, you have a good weekend.